Hey guys, tonight we are going to wake up in a house that feels more like a fortress against the weather than a home. We are going back to a time when seeing the outside world was a luxury you had to pay for with your warmth, where the simple act of checking the weather involved a blast of freezing air right to the face. You probably believe that medieval people looked out through charming, diamond-patterned lattice windows as they sipped their morning ale. But for the vast majority of history, looking out a window meant opening a hole in the wall and hoping a bird didn't fly in before you get too comfortable, and possibly fall asleep halfway through. Tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive, and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel while the world sleeps. Now dim the lights. Let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in, and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, but you cannot tell if it is morning or the middle of the night. The darkness in the room is heavy and complete, a physical weight that presses against your eyelids, even when they are open. You are lying in a bed that feels less like a piece of furniture and more like a nest, a hollowed-out pile of straw mattresses and wool blankets that you have burrowed into for warmth. The air in the room is still, holding the faint, stale chill of stone walls that never quite warm up, no matter how long the fire burns. You take a slow breath, and you can smell the remnants of last night's wood smoke clinging to the rafters above you, mixed with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. It is a cozy smell, in a way, the smell of a space that is sealed tight against the world. You shift your legs under the heavy wool, your toes searching for a pocket of warmth you might have missed. Outside you can hear the wind. It is a low, moaning sound, a continuous rush of air that scrapes against the rough stone of the cottage walls. It sounds angry, or perhaps just persistent, searching for any crack or gap to slide its icy fingers into your sanctuary. But it cannot get in. You are safe in this box of shadow. You are protected. But you are also completely blind. This is the reality of your morning. You know the sun must be up by now. You can feel a subtle shift in the air, a sense of the world waking up beyond the walls, but inside it is as dark as a cave. You do not have the luxury of a pane of glass to let the light in while keeping the wind out. That is a kind of magic reserved for the great cathedrals or the castles of the incredibly wealthy, and even they use it sparingly. For you, and for almost everyone you know, the concept of a window is literal. It is a wind eye, an opening in the wall to let the smoke out and the air in. And right now, that eye is squeezed shut. You lie there for a few more moments, debating the inevitable. To start your day, to find your clothes, to stir the embers in the hearth, you need light. But to get light, you must invite the winter in. It is the great compromise of your life. You can be warm and blind, or you can be able to see while your teeth chatter. You push the blankets down, the wool rough against your fingertips, and the cold air of the room instantly nips at your exposed skin. It is a bracing, unwelcome greeting. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your feet finding the floor. The floor is hard, packed earth covered in a thick layer of rushes, dried reeds that rustle softly under your weight. They are softer than stone, but they hold the cold of the ground beneath them. You navigate the room by memory. You know the heavy oak table is 3 steps to your left. You know the bench is just beyond that. You move with your hands outstretched, your fingertips brushing against the rough texture of the timber frame that holds the house together. Your shin bumps lightly against a stool, a familiar dull pain that barely registers because you do it almost every morning. This is the dance of the windowless house. You are intimate with every corner of your home because you spend half your life feeling your way through it in the gloom. You reach the far wall. The stone here feels damp, sweating slightly with condensation. Your hand finds the iron latch of the shutter. This is not a delicate piece of joinery. The shutter is a solid slab of oak, nearly 2 inches thick, built to withstand storms, stray arrows, and the persistent gnawing of rats. It is heavy, warped slightly by years of rain and sun, and it sits deep within the thick stone wall. You can feel the draft coming through the cracks around the edges, a thin, sharp stream of freezing air that hisses quietly as it forces its way inside. It strikes your wrist like a blade of ice. You grip the iron handle. It is cold enough to burn your palm. You take a breath, bracing yourself, and then you lift the latch and shove the wood outward. The transformation is violent and instantaneous. The heavy wood swings out with a groan of rusty hinges, banging against the exterior wall. Immediately, a shaft of gray, pale light stabs into the room, cutting through the darkness like a physical object. Dust motes dance furiously in the sudden beam, swirling in the turbulence. But with the light comes the wind. It rushes in, no longer a muffled moan, but a roaring presence, carrying the smell of wet mud, decaying leaves, and rain. It swirls around your ankles, extinguishes the weak glow of the embers in the fireplace, and seems to strip the heat from your body in seconds. You blink against the sudden brightness, your eyes watering from the cold and the glare. You look out at the muddy yard, the gray sky, the bare branches of the trees thrashing in the wind. You have your light. You can see your breath puffing out in white clouds before you. You can see the table, the unmade bed, the soot staining the walls. But the room is rapidly becoming uninhabitable. The temperature drops so fast you can feel it on your skin like water. This is the choice. The window is open. You have light to work, to sew, to cook, to clean. But you are shivering. You stand there for a moment, letting the fresh air flush out the stale smoke, watching the clouds race by. Then, unable to stand the chill, you grab the handle and pull the heavy shutter closed again. The slam of the wood against the frame cuts off the wind. The light vanishes. You are back in the dark, safe and cold, listening to the wind howl in frustration outside. You fumble in the blackness for the flint and steel to light a rushlight, a small, smoky torch made of a reed dipped in fat. It gives off a weak, sputtering yellow glow, barely enough to illuminate your hands, but it will have to do. The shutter stays closed. This binary existence, total exposure or total enclosure, is the defining feature of your architecture. Historians still argue whether the placement of these window openings was primarily for light or for ventilation. Some suggest that in the earliest cottages, the window was purely a smoke hole, and any light it let in was just a happy accident. Others believe the windows were carefully positioned to catch the prevailing winds for cooling in summer, which becomes a curse in winter. Regardless of the original intent, the result for you is a house that breathes only when you allow it to, and usually you prefer it to hold its breath. You move to the hearth, the weak rushlight casting long, jumping shadows that make the furniture look like crouching beasts. You kneel on the cold stones and blow on the embers, feeding them a handful of dry straw. The fire catches, offering a small pool of orange light and a welcome wave of heat. But the corners of the room remain swallowed by shadow. You can't see the far wall. You can't see the ceiling. You are living in a small bubble of visibility centered on the fire. It is strange to think that your house is actually filled with windows. There is likely one on each wall to catch the sun at different times of the day. But they are all shuttered tight. From the outside, your house looks blind, a fortress of timber and plaster with its eyes squeezed shut. If you were to walk through your village right now, it would look abandoned. Every house is sealed. No light spills out onto the street because there is no glass to let it through. The village is a collection of wooden boxes, each containing a family hiding in the dark. The shutter itself is a piece of technology you rarely think about, but it is vital. It is usually made of vertical planks of wood held together by horizontal battens, creating a board that is simple but incredibly strong. The wood is unpainted, darkened by age and weather. Over the years, the rain has raised the grain of the oak, so it feels like the ridges of a fingerprint under your hand. The iron hinges are long straps that reach halfway across the shutter to support the weight, hammered into place with thick, square-headed nails. It is a door for the wind, not a window for the eye. There is a certain coziness to this darkness, though. It forces your world to be small. You sit by the fire, repairing a tool or stirring a pot, and your focus is absolute because you cannot see anything else. There are no distractions outside because outside ceases to exist when the shutters are barred. You are contained. But the lack of light has its costs. The air in the room grows thick and hazy with smoke from the open fire. Without the draft from the window to pull the smoke up the chimney or out the roof vent, it lingers. It stings your eyes. It makes you cough. You are constantly balancing the need for fresh air against the need for warmth, playing a slow, strategic game with the shutters throughout the day. Around noon, the sun might break through the clouds. You notice a bright, thin line of light appearing on the floor, where the shutter doesn't quite meet the sill. It's a laser, sharp beam that highlights every speck of dust on the rushes. The wood of the shutter warms slightly, radiating a faint heat. You might decide to crack it open just a few inches. You use a wooden prop, a simple stick, to hold the shutter ajar. Now you have a slice of the world. You can see a strip of the sky, a section of the fence, perhaps a chicken scratching in the dirt. This squint is your television, your news feed, your clock. You watch the angle of the shadow to tell the time. You watch the color of the sky to predict the rain. But even this small opening lets in the noise. You hear the blacksmith hammering 3 houses down. You hear a cart rattling over the frozen ruts of the lane. The shutter is the only barrier between your private life and the public world. When it is open, you are on display. Anyone walking by can look into your dark home and see you sitting by the fire. There is no privacy with a hole in the wall. This is why, perhaps, you keep it closed even when the weather is mild. The shutter is your curtain, your blinds, and your wall, all in one. It is a common misconception that medieval interiors were colorful and bright. We see paintings of kings in well-lit halls, but for you, the colors of your home are brown, gray, and black, simply because you can rarely see them clearly enough to appreciate them. If you owned a bright red tunic, it would look muddy maroon in the firelight. If you painted a mural on your wall, it would be lost in the gloom. The darkness dictates your aesthetic. It dictates your schedule. You rise when the light is strong enough to navigate without breaking a toe, and you sleep when the fire dies down, because oil and candles are too expensive to waste on a shuttered room. There is a quirky habit some of your neighbors have adopted to deal with the drafts. In the depths of winter, when the wind is particularly cruel, they take old sacks or worn-out blankets and nail them over the window openings on the inside, behind the shutters. It stops the drafts, yes, but it also creates a perfect breeding ground for mold. The fabric gets damp from the condensation and freezes solid at night, turning into a stiff, icy sheet that blocks the shutter from opening at all. You have tried it once, but waking up to a window covered in a sheet of frozen burlap was not a pleasant experience. It felt like living inside a drum. Historians often discuss the psychological impact of this architecture, living in a world where the boundary between inside and outside is so absolute creates a specific mindset. The outside is wild, uncontrollable, and bright. The inside is controlled, domestic, and dark. There is no middle ground, no sunroom, no bay window where you can sit and read while it rains. You are either in the elements or hiding from them. This separation makes the home feel safer, deeper, a true retreat. But it also makes it isolating. As the afternoon wears on, you might open the shutter on the leeward side of the house, the side sheltered from the wind. This is a strategic calculation. You check the direction of the smoke from your chimney. If the wind is coming from the north, you open the south shutter. You get a few hours of indirect light, enough to sweep the floor or mend a tunic. The light is soft, filtered by the gray clouds, but to your light-starved eyes, it feels miraculous. It reveals the texture of the plaster walls, the grain of the table, the faces of your family. You soak it in like a plant. But the winter days are short, too short. The light begins to fail early in the afternoon. The gray square of the open window deepens to blue, then purple. The cold begins to creep back in, sharper now as the sun drops. You go to the window. You look out one last time at the darkening village. You see other shutters closing one by one. Bang, bang. It is the sound of the village shutting its eyes. You pull the prop stick in. You grip the cold iron handle. You pull the heavy wood shut and drop the latch bar into place with a solid thunk. The darkness returns instantly. You are back in the box. You move to the fire, stoking it up for the long evening. This is the rhythm of your life, governed by the heavy swing of oak planks. You are a master of the shutter, a guardian of the heat. But as you sit there, staring into the flames, you can't help but wish for something else. You wish for a way to keep the wind out, but keep the light in. You have heard rumors of the rich merchants in the city using something new. Sheets of horn, scraped so thin they are translucent, or pieces of glass held together with lead. But those are fantasies, things that cost more than your entire house. You need something practical, something you can make yourself, something that uses materials you already have. You look at a piece of linen cloth lying on the table, a simple shirt that needs mending. You look at the jar of animal fat sitting on the shelf. You don't know it yet, but the solution is sitting right there in front of you, waiting for a moment of desperation or ingenuity to combine them. For now, though, you are content with the wood. You listen to the wind rise again, howling around the corners of the cottage. It rattles the shutter in its frame, a gentle, rhythmic clattering that tells you the storm is picking up. You wrap your blanket tighter around your shoulders. The draft is still there, that thin knife of cold air slicing through the gap. But you are used to it. You shift your position to block it with your back. The problem with the wooden shutter isn't just the dark. It's the isolation. It turns every home into a separate island. You can't wave to a neighbor walking past. You can't see who is knocking at the door until you open it. It breeds suspicion. It breeds silence. A village with glass windows is a community. A village with wooden shutters is a collection of secrets. You wonder what it would be like to live in a house of light. To wake up and see the sun without feeling the frost. To watch the rain fall without getting wet. It seems like an impossible dream, a contradiction of nature. How can a wall be solid to the wind but open to the sight? The air in the room is cooling down as the fire settles into a bed of glowing coals. You can see your breath again, faint ghosts in the firelight. You know that by morning, the water in the bucket by the door will have a thin crust of ice on it. The shutter will be frozen shut, requiring a hard shove to break the seal of frost. That is a problem for tomorrow. For now, you exist in the warm, smoky, comforting dark. You lean back against the wall, the rough plaster snagging your wool tunic. You close your eyes, matching the darkness inside your head to the darkness of the room. The sound of the wind is a lullaby, a reminder that the world is harsh, but you are sheltered. You think about the heavy oak plank protecting you. It is simple. It is effective. But it is also a prison. There has to be a better way. You drift in the space between waking and sleeping, your mind playing with the possibilities. What if you stretched a skin across the hole? No, too thick. What if you wove the basket reeds tighter? No, the wind would still cut through. The answer is elusive, hidden in the materials of your everyday life. But change comes slowly in this world. For generations, your ancestors have slept behind these wooden shields. They woke in the dark, they worked in the dark, and they slept in the dark. It is the way of things. Yet, the desire for light is a powerful thing. It is a hunger just as real as the need for food. And humans are very good at finding ways to feed their hunger. As you drift deeper into relaxation, you can almost feel the potential of the future waiting just out of reach. You don't know that soon, the streets of your village will begin to change. You don't know that the dull, blank faces of the houses will soon start to glow with a strange, golden amber light. You don't know that the darkness is about to be defeated, not by glass, but by a shirt and a bucket of grease. But tonight, the shutter holds firm. The latch is secure. The wind eyes are closed. You are safe in the gloom, suspended in the long, quiet wait for the sun. You leave the dark, smoky comfort of your home and step out into the gray morning light. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from a dozen other chimneys. You pull your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, the heavy fabric scratching against your neck, a familiar irritation that you barely notice anymore. You are heading towards the edge of the village, towards the sound of rhythmic scraping and the sharp scent of fresh sawdust. You are tired of the darkness. You are tired of the choice between freezing and going blind in your own living room. You have decided to invest in a piece of technology that promises to change the way you live, even if it seems impossibly simple. You approach the carpenter's workshop. It is a lean-to structure built against the side of a larger barn, open on one side to let in the maximum amount of light. Even from here, you can see the carpenter working. He is standing at a heavy trestle table, his breath clouding in the cold air as he pushes a plane across a length of pale wood. The sound is soothing, a long, continuous hiss of metal on timber, followed by the soft flutter of a wood shaving curling away and falling to the floor. You step inside, out of the wind. The floor here is ankle-deep in shavings, a soft, golden carpet that smells of pine and ash. It creates a muffled silence, absorbing your footsteps. The carpenter looks up, nodding once, his hands never leaving the wood. He knows why you are here. You are not the first person in the village to ask for a fenestral, a wooden frame designed to fill the wind, without blocking the light. You watch as he selects the timber for your frame. He does not use the heavy, dark oak that makes up the beams of your house, or the solid slab of your shutter. That would be too heavy, too thick. Instead, he reaches for a bundle of split ash, or perhaps willow. The wood is light, flexible, and straight-grained. He holds a strip up to the light, sighting down its length with one eye closed to check for warping. It needs to be true. If the wood is twisted, the frame will not sit flush against your stone walls, and the wind will whistle through the gaps, defeating the entire purpose. He places the strip on the bench and picks up a draw knife. You watch the blade bite into the bark, stripping it away to reveal the creamy white wood beneath. This is a process of reduction. He is shaving the wood down, making it thin and lightweight. You can see the muscles in his forearms shift as he pulls the knife towards him, the blade singing against the grain. It is a hypnotic motion. Pull, slice, clear. Pull, slice, clear. The pile of shavings at his feet grows, and the piece of wood transforms from a rough branch into a smooth, rectangular batten. He measures the opening of your window from a stick you brought with you. A simple tally stick with a notch cut into it to mark the width and height of the hole in your wall. He transfers the marks to the wood with a piece of charcoal. There is no measuring tape, no standardized sizing. Every window in the village is slightly different, a product of the stonemason's eye and the settling of the earth. Your frame must be custom, made to fit the quirks of your specific house. Next comes the joinery. You might expect heavy iron nails, but nails are expensive, handmade by the blacksmith one at a time. Using them on a lightweight frame like this would be a waste, and the heavy iron might split the thin ash. Instead, the carpenter reaches for a small, fine-toothed saw. He cuts the corners of the battens at angles, or perhaps he cuts simple lap joints, where half the thickness of the wood is removed from each piece so they overlap perfectly flat. He applies a dab of glue, a dark, amber substance kept warm in a pot near a small brazier. It smells strong, a pungent mix of animal hide and bone. But it is the strongest bond, you know. He presses the corners together. Then, using a small hand drill, a gimlet, he bores a tiny hole through the joint. He picks up a wooden peg, no vivid than a matchstick, and taps it into the hole with a small mallet. The sound is a dull, solid tap. The peg swells with the glue, locking the joint together forever. He does this for all four corners, and suddenly there is a rectangle. It is flimsy on its own, wobbling slightly as he lifts it. But it is the skeleton of your new window. Now comes the part that requires your contribution. You reach into your bag and pull out the fabric. It is a piece of linen. Perhaps it was once a tablecloth, or a sheet, or an old tunic that had worn too thin at the elbows to be useful as clothing. It is not bright white. It is the color of oatmeal, a natural, grayish, beige that speaks of the flax fields it came from. It is rough to the touch, the weave visible to the naked eye. You can see the tiny nubs and slubs in the thread where the spinner joined the fibers. Linen is the fabric of your life. It is what you wear next to your skin, what you sleep on, what you wrap your food in. It is made from the flax plant, a crop that requires immense labor to process. You remember watching the women in late summer pulling the flax stalks, never cutting them, always pulling to preserve the full length of the fiber. You remember the retting, soaking the stalks in the stream, until they rotted and smelled like decay, dissolving the gum that held the fibers together. You remember the breaking, the scutching, the heckling, the violent, rhythmic beating of the plants to separate the soft, golden fibers from the woody core. And then the spinning, the endless spinning of the drop spindle, twisting the fluff into strong thread. This piece of cloth in your hands is the result of months of hard work, and now it will serve a new purpose. The carpenter takes the cloth. He lays the wooden frame down on the table and spreads the linen over it. He smooths it out with his large, rough hands, pushing away the wrinkles. The cloth is larger than the frame, draping over the edges like a tablecloth. Now begins the stretching. This is the most critical step. If the cloth is loose, it will flap in the wind. It will sag in the damp. It needs to be tight, tight enough to bounce a coin, tight as a drum skin. He starts at the top. He folds the excess linen over the wooden batten. This time, he does use tacks, tiny, sharp slivers of iron, scarcely larger than thorns. He taps one into the center of the top rail. He moves to the bottom rail. He grips the linen with a pair of wooden pincers, pulling it down. You can see the weave of the fabric distort, the horizontal threads bowing downwards under the tension. He pulls until the cloth hums with strain. He holds it there with one hand and drives a tack into the bottom rail. He moves to the sides. Pull, tack. Pull, tack. He works his way out from the centers to the corners, alternating sides to keep the tension even. It is a slow, deliberate process. He stops often to run his hand over the surface, checking for slack spots. He is tuning the window like an instrument. You watch the fabric transform. It stops being a floppy piece of laundry and becomes a structural element. It becomes a rigid, flat surface. The roughness of the weave seems to smooth out as the threads are pulled straight. There is a fascinating fringe theory that the phrase, or tenterhooks, comes from a similar process in the cloth industry, where newly woven wool was stretched on large frames using hooks to dry without shrinking. While this is a different scale, the principle in the workshop is identical. You are watching the linen being put under stress, forced to hold a shape that isn't natural to it. When he reaches the corners, he folds the fabric neatly, creating a crisp, sharp edge, and drives the final tacks home. He takes a sharp knife and trims the excess cloth, slicing it away close to the nails. The result is a neat, pale rectangle. He flips it over. The front side is smooth, a blank canvas of beige linen framed by the pale ash wood. He taps it with his finger. It makes a low, thrumming sound. It is ready. You pay the carpenter, perhaps with a few coins, perhaps with a promise of labor in return, or a basket of eggs. You take the frame. It is surprisingly light. You carry it under your arm, shielding it from the wind. As you walk back through the village, you feel a strange sense of anticipation. You are carrying a piece of the wall, but a wall that weighs nothing. When you get home, the house is as dark as you left it. The fire has burned down to embers. You can see the cold draft blowing the ashes around the hearth. You go to the window. You open the heavy wooden shutter, and the wind blasts in, predictable and rude. But this time, you have an answer. You take the linen frame, your fenestral, and press it into the opening. It is a tight fit. The carpenter measured well. You have to tap the corners with the heel of your hand to get it to seat properly into the stone reveal. It wedges in, friction holding it in place against the rough masonry. You might add a small wooden wedge at the bottom just to be sure, tapping it in to lock the frame against the stone. The effect is immediate and startling. The wind stops. The roaring draft that usually tears through the room is cut off. But the light is still there. It is not the clear, sharp vision you had with the open shutter. You cannot see the trees or the muddy yard. You cannot see the clouds. What you see is a glowing white rectangle. The linen captures the daylight and diffuses it. The harsh, gray winter light hits the fabric and scatters, filling the room with a soft, flat, pearlescent glow. It is a milky light, shadowless and cool. You step back and look at it. It looks like a patch of fog has been trapped in your wall. The weave of the fabric is clearly visible, a grid of thousands of tiny crosses backlit by the sun. Where the thread is thick, it is darker. Where the weave is loose, pinpricks of bright white shine through. It is beautiful in its utility. You sit on your bench and watch it. For the first time, you are sitting in a room that is sealed against the wind, but filled with daylight. You can see the corners of the room. You can see the rafters. You can see the dust on the table. It is a revelation. You don't have to choose anymore. You have cheated the binary rules of your existence. However, as the hours pass, you notice the limitations. The light is dim. Linen, in its natural state, is opaque. It blocks a significant amount of the sun's power. It is like wearing a blindfold and looking at a candle. You have to sit close to the window to do any fine work. If a cloud passes over the sun, the room plunges into a twilight gloom. And then there is the air. While the frame stops the gusting wind, the linen is porous. You can put your hand up to the cloth and feel the cold seeping through the tiny gaps between the threads. It breathes. This is good for ventilation, keeping the air in your house fresh, but it means the room never gets truly warm. The heat from your fire fights a losing battle against the giant breathable membrane in your wall. Historians still argue about the prevalence of these dry linen screens. Some suggest they were only used in the summer to keep out insects while allowing airflow, while others believe they were a year-round necessity for the poor. In the winter, the dry cloth would absorb moisture from the damp air outside and the warm, humid air inside. By morning, your beautiful white screen might be sagging, heavy with water, or stiff with frost. You reach out and touch the fabric. It is cold. It feels damp. The wind outside is picking up, and you can see the linen vibrating, pulsing in and out like a beating heart. The frame creaks slightly in the opening. It is a fragile barrier. You worry that a strong enough storm might punch right through it or rip the fabric from the tacks. But for now it holds. You watch the shadow of a bird fly past the window. You don't see the bird, only a swift, blurred darkening of the white rectangle, gone in an instant. It is a ghostly way to view the world. You are connected to the outside, yet completely removed from it. You can tell if it is day or night, bright or dull, but the details of the world, the faces of neighbors, the color of the leaves, the arrival of a cart, are lost to you. You realize that this is just the first step. You have solved the wind mostly. You have kept the light, sort of. But you have lost the view, and the light is too weak. It is a pale, sickly thing that barely reaches the back of the room. You find yourself glancing at the jar of fat on the shelf again. You look at the cloth, then at the fat. There is a theory that the idea of oiling the cloth came from a spill, a drop of grease falling from a candle onto a tablecloth, creating a spot that seemed to glow with a translucent clarity compared to the dull fabric around it. You can imagine a frustrated ancestor of yours sitting in a room just like this, noticing that accident and wondering if they could replicate it on a larger scale. But for today, you are content with the dry linen. You enjoy the novelty of the white light. You watch the sun go down, the white rectangle fading to gray, then to a dark, muddy blue. When it is truly dark, you see the reverse happen. You light your rushlight, and suddenly, from the outside, your house is glowing. A faint, ghostly square of light appears on your wall. For a passerby, it would look like a spirit is trapped inside. You are no longer hiding in the dark. You are broadcasting your presence. The room feels different now. The acoustics have changed. The solid shutter bounced sound back at you. The linen absorbs it. The room feels softer, quieter. The sharp echo of your footsteps is dampened. It is a cozier space. You run your hand over the wooden frame one last time before bed. You admire the joinery, the way the ash wood has been smoothed by the carpenter's plane. It is a piece of furniture, as valuable as your table or your chest. It is a sign of status, however small. It says that you have risen above the level of the animal, hiding in a cave. You have engineered your environment. As you lie in bed, watching the dying embers of the fire reflect faintly on the white cloth, you think about the nature of barriers. Walls are solid, shutters are solid, but this fenestral is something else. It is a membrane. It filters the world rather than blocking it. It is a sophisticated concept for a simple life. The wind rises again outside, howling around the eaves. You see the cloth shudder in the frame. A draft of cold air pushes through the weave, reaching your face. It is not the icy blade of the open window, but a general, seeping chill. You pull the blankets up. The dry linen is better than nothing, but it is not enough. You need something that seals the pores, something that turns the fabric into a skin, something that catches the light and amplifies it, rather than just diffusing it. You drift off to sleep with that thought in your mind. The white rectangle hovers in the darkness like a watchful eye, cloudy and cataract, blind, waiting for the clarity that is to come. You dream of a light that is warm and golden, a light that feels like the sun, even when the sun is hidden behind clouds. You dream of the amber glow. The morning will bring the need for maintenance. You know that the dampness of the night will have loosened the fibers. You might have to tap the wedges tighter. You might have to wipe the condensation from the sill. The relationship with your window is an active one. It is not a passive sheet of glass that you ignore for years. It is a living part of your house that needs tending. But the darkness of the sealed box is gone. You have broken the seal. You have stretched a piece of your own clothing across the gap and claimed the light for yourself. It is a victory of human ingenuity, a triumph of the weaver and the carpenter over the brutal indifference of the winter sky. The decision to upgrade your window from a simple dry cloth to a sophisticated piece of weather-resistant engineering begins not with a grand plan, but with a simple realization that you are tired of the draft. The dry linen, for all its cleverness, is still just a piece of fabric. It flutters when the wind howls, and on particularly damp mornings, it clings to the moisture in the air until it hangs limp and heavy, like a sail that has lost its wind. You want something sturdier. You want something that repels the water rather than drinking it. You want the amber light you have heard so much about. You take the frame down from the window opening. It comes away easily, having shrunk slightly in the drier air of the house, and you carry it out to the back of your dwelling. This is not a job for the indoors. The process you are about to undertake is messy, sticky, and pungent. It is a transformation that requires heat and patience, and it is best done where the inevitable spills won't ruin your sleeping furs. You set up a workspace on a pair of wooden trestles in the yard. The sky is overcast, a flat sheet of gray that promises rain later, which gives you a deadline. You need to get this done and drying before the heavens open. On a small fire nearby, safely away from anything flammable, you have placed an iron pot. Inside the pot is the magic ingredient linseed oil. Linseed oil is a remarkable substance. It comes from the same plant as your linen window, flax. It feels almost poetic that the solution to the linen's porousness comes from the seed of the very same plant that provided the fiber. You are essentially reuniting the stalk and the seed to create a composite material. But while the linen is dry and fibrous, the oil is thick, golden, and viscous. You watch it heating in the pot. You don't want it to boil just to warm up. Cold oil is thick like honey. Warm oil becomes thin and runny, able to penetrate deep into the fibers of the cloth. As it heats, the smell begins to rise. It is a distinctive scent, nutty, earthy, and heavy. It smells of fields and crushed seeds, but with a sharper, chemical tang that catches in the back of your throat. It is the smell of a painter's studio, though you don't know that association yet. To you, it is simply the smell of industry, of waterproofing. You have a brush, perhaps made of hog bristles, tied to a wooden handle, or maybe just a rag wrapped around a stick. You dip it into the warm oil. The liquid is a rich, deep yellow, almost orange in the pot. It drips from the brush in long, lazy strands. You move to the linen frame lying flat on the trestles. You touch the brush to the fabric. The effect is instant and satisfying. The dry, beige linen drinks the oil greedily. The spot where you touched it turns a dark, translucent brown. You drag the brush across the surface, leaving a wide, wet trail. You are not painting a picture, you are saturating a thirst. You work systematically, brushing from left to right, watching the oil soak in. It wicks along the threads, spreading slightly beyond your brushstrokes as the fabric pulls the liquid into its weave. This is the moment of alchemy. You are changing the fundamental nature of the material. Linen is naturally hydrophilic. It loves water. It soaks it up, swells, and holds it. By saturating it with oil, you are making it hydrophobic. You are filling every microscopic air pocket in the fiber with grease. Once this oil dries, or rather cures, the water will have nowhere to go. Rain will hit the window and simply bead up and roll off. You are creating a primitive form of plastic. The work is mesmerizing, but it is also incredibly messy. The oil gets everywhere. It runs down the handle of the brush and coats your fingers in a slick, shiny film. You wipe your hands on your tunic, leaving dark smears that will never wash out. You realize too late that you should have worn your worst clothes. The oil feels strange on your skin, heavy and clogging. It doesn't evaporate like water. It sits there, warm and persistent. As you cover the entire surface, the cloth loses its opacity. The dry linen was like a sheet of paper. The oiled linen looks like a sheet of murky water. You can see the shadow of the trestle through it. You can see the grass below. It hasn't become transparent like glass. You couldn't read a book through it. But it has become translucent. It allows light to pass through without scattering it quite as much. You reach the edges, carefully dabbing the oil right up to the wood of the frame. You paint the wood too. Why not? The oil will protect the ash frame from rot and worms just as well as it protects the cloth. The entire object turns a uniform, glistening gold, but one coat is rarely enough. The cloth is thirsty. You watch as the first layer sinks in, leaving dull, matty patches where the fibers are still hungry. You dip the brush again. You apply a second coat, then perhaps a third. You want the fabric to be fully gorged, unable to take another drop. You are looking for a uniform, glossy sheen across the entire surface. There is a fringe historical theory that suggests some villagers, lacking expensive linseed oil, might have used other fluids to achieve this effect, including fish oil or even clarified butter. While the chemistry works, any fat will make cellulose translucent. The smell of a window treated with rancid fish oil in the middle of summer is something best left to the imagination. You are fortunate to have the linseed. It smells strong, yes, but it smells clean in a vegetable sort of way. Now comes the trickiest part of the process, the drying. You lift the frame carefully. It is heavier now, weighted down by the oil. You hold it up to the gray sky. Even without the sun, the difference is striking. The light comes through with a warm, golden hue. The gray day looks less depressing through the filter of the oil. It looks like late afternoon sunlight. You can imagine how this will change the mood of your room. But you cannot put it back in the window yet. Linseed oil does not dry by evaporation like water. It dries by a chemical reaction called polymerization. It reacts with the oxygen in the air to link its molecules together into long, hard chains. This takes time, a lot of time. If you put it in your window now, the wind would blow dust and insects onto the wet surface, and they would be trapped there forever, fossilized in your view. You hang the frame in a sheltered spot, perhaps under the eaves of the barn, or in a dedicated drying shed, if you are lucky enough to have one. It needs air circulation to cure, but it needs protection from the rain. You leave it there, swinging gently in the breeze, and then you wait. The waiting is the hardest part. You check it the next morning. It is still tacky to the touch. Your finger leaves a print in the surface. You check it the day after. Still sticky. Depending on the weather and the thickness of the oil, it can take days, sometimes weeks, for the oil to fully harden into a solid, resinous sheet. During this time, the window is a magnet for debris. You might come out to find a moth stuck to the center of your beautiful new window, its wings spread in a final, tragic display. You carefully pick it off with the tip of a knife, smoothing the oil over the disturbance. You pick off dandelion seeds, bits of straw, and the occasional curious fly. The window records the history of the wind during its drying phase. This is why many historical oiled windows, when examined closely, have a rough, textured surface. They are not perfect planes. They are landscapes of small accidents. Historians still argue about the exact recipes used for these oil mixtures. Some medieval instructional texts suggest adding a small amount of beeswax to the hot oil to make the final coating more flexible and less prone to cracking in the winter cold. Others mention dissolving resin, like pine pitch, into the oil to make it harder and more waterproof, effectively creating a primitive varnish. It is likely that every region, perhaps even every family, had their own secret sauce for window oiling, a recipe passed down and tweaked through trial and error. While you wait for the window to cure, you have to deal with the cleanup. You have a pile of oil, soaked rags that you use to wipe up spills. You toss them in a corner of the workshop. You don't know it, but you have just created a potential fire hazard. As linseed oil oxidizes, it generates heat. In a thin layer on a window, this heat dissipates into the air. But bunched up in a pile of rags, the heat is trapped. The temperature can rise and rise until the rags burst into flame spontaneously. It is a lesson many workshops learn the hard way. Fortunately for you, the cool, damp air of the season keeps your workshop safe, but the risk is always there, a hidden dragon in the pile of laundry. After a week, you touch the surface of the frame again. It feels different. It is no longer wet. It feels rubbery, like the skin of a drum. It is smooth, slightly yielding, but dry. You tap it, thump. It makes a deeper, more resonant sound than the dry cloth did. The fabric is taut, tightened by the curing process. It has transformed from a woven textile into a composite building material. You take it down. The color has deepened to a rich, dark amber. It looks like a slab of hardened honey. You carry it back to the house. The smell has mellowed, losing its sharp chemical edge and settling into a faint, lingering background scent that you will soon come to associate with home. You fit the frame back into the window opening. It slides in with a satisfying resistance, the oiled wood gripping the stone. You tap the wedges back in. The moment you step back, the change is profound. The light in the room is no longer the milky, white ghost light of the dry linen. It is warm, it is gold. The gray winter light outside is filtered through the yellow oil, stripped of its blue tones, and cast into the room as a perpetual sunset. The psychological effect is immediate. The room feels warmer, even though the temperature hasn't changed. The cold stone walls are washed in a color that suggests firelight, even when the hearth is cold. You run your hand over the surface of the new window. It feels slick and waterproof. You are no longer afraid of the driving rain. You know that when the storm comes, the water will hit this surface and slide right off. You have created a barrier that is selective. It rejects the rain, rejects the wind, but welcomes the light. But there is a maintenance cost to this luxury. The oil slowly degrades over time. The sun bleaches it, and the rain eventually softens it. Every year, or perhaps every 2 years, you will have to take the frame down and repeat the messy, sticky process. You will have to clean off the grime of a year's worth of smoke and dust, which sticks tenaciously to the oil, and apply a fresh coat. It is a cycle of renewal. Your window is not a permanent fixture. It is a creature that needs to be fed oil to survive. There is also the matter of the transparency. While the oil makes the cloth translucent, it also yellows the view. If you look closely through the weave, the world outside looks like it is trapped in amber. The greens of the trees are muted. The blue of the sky becomes a sickly green. You are viewing the world through a sepia filter. You will never see a true blue sky from inside your house again, as long as these windows are in place. But it is a small price to pay for the warmth. As you clean your brush, working the stiff bristles with soap and sand to get the gummed oil out, you think about the other houses in the village. You can tell who has oiled windows and who has dry cloth just by walking down the street at night. The dry cloth houses glow white. The oiled cloth houses glow orange. It creates a patchwork of color in the village darkness. You are now part of the Orange Club. It feels like a promotion. The smell of the oil lingers on your hands for days. No matter how much you scrub with rough soap and sand, the scent remains in your pores. It is a badge of your labor. Every time you eat, every time you touch your face, you smell the linseed. It reminds you of the work, but it also reminds you of the result. You have conquered the gloom. That night, a storm rolls in. You lie in bed and listen to the rain lashing against the house. You hear the familiar sound of water striking stone and thatch. But then you hear a new sound. Tap, tap, drum. It is the sound of raindrops hitting the taut, oiled skin of your window. It sounds like fingers drumming on a table. It is a rhythmic, confident sound. You know the water is not soaking through. You know it is streaming down the face of the cloth, harmlessly draining away. You look at the window. It is pitch black, of course, but you can imagine the water beating on the surface. You feel a surge of satisfaction. The draft is gone. The damp smell of wet linen is gone. In its place is the faint, nutty aroma of the curing oil, warming slightly as the room heats up. It is the smell of safety. The oiling process has done something else, too. It has made the cloth tough. Dry linen can be easily torn by a stray branch or a determined rat. The oiled linen is stiffer, slicker. A rat's claws find no purchase on the smooth surface. A branch is more likely to bounce off the rubbery tension of the screen. You have armored your home with a vegetable shield. You think about the carpenter and the weaver. They provided the raw materials, but you provided the magic. You combined their work with the essence of the seed to create something new. It is a humble technology, low, tech and messy, but it transforms the experience of living indoors. As you drift off, you are no longer just a person hiding in a box. You are an engineer of your own comfort. You have manipulated the elements, earth, plant, and oil, to create a filter for the world. You are safe behind your golden shield, ready to face the winter with a new kind of light. The sticky, pungent mess of the afternoon is already forgotten, replaced by the enduring glow of the amber window. You wake slowly, pulled from your dreams not by the freezing bite of a draft or the sudden, blinding glare of an opened shutter, but by a soft, pervasive warmth that seems to fill the room like a gas. For a moment, you are confused. You lie under your heavy wool blankets and wonder if you have overslept, missing the morning chores and waking only as the sun begins to set. The light in the room is the color of late afternoon, a rich, honeyed gold that suggests the day is ending. But you listen to the village sounds. The rooster still crowing, the distant clang of the milk pail, and realize it is morning. You are simply living inside a permanent sunset. This is the reality of life behind the oiled cloth. The fenestral you installed has transformed your home from a cave into a lantern. The harsh, blue-gray light of the winter sky strikes the outside of your house, hits the barrier of linseed, soaked linen, and is transmuted. It enters your space stripped of its cold tones, filtered through the vegetable amber of the cured oil. It is a trick of physics that feels like a minor miracle. Even on the bleakest, most overcast Tuesday in February, your main room feels as if it is bathed in the glow of a warm hearth fire, even when the actual fire is nothing but a pile of white ash. You slide out of bed, and the difference in the air is palpable. The stone floor is still cold under your feet. That will never change. But the air itself feels still. The sharp currents of freezing wind that used to snake around the room, hunting for your ankles, are gone. The oiled cloth is doing its job. You walk to the window, drawn by the light. It is a luminous rectangle in the dark wall, glowing with a steady, flat intensity. It does not sparkle like glass, it radiates. It looks less like a window and more like a sheet of heated metal cooling down. You reach out and hover your hand near the surface. You can feel the cold radiating from it. It is not an insulator like a modern double-paned unit. But there is no breeze. You press your palm gently against the taut fabric. It feels smooth, slightly waxy, and cool. Outside, you know the wind is stripping the leaves from the trees, but inside, the cloth barely trembles. It vibrates with a low-frequency hum, a tension held in check by the wooden frame and the hardened oil. You turn back to the room. The quality of the light is extraordinary. Because the linen diffuses the sun, there are no hard shadows. The light wraps around objects. The table does not cast a sharp, black silhouette on the floor. Instead, it floats in a pool of soft, vague darkness. This shadowless light is strange to modern eyes, used to the directional beams of spotlights or clear windows. But for you, it is practical. It means you can work in any corner of the room without blocking your own light. You sit at the table to repair a harness. In the old days of the open shutter, you would have had to sit right next to the freezing opening to see the stitching, your hands going numb as you worked. Now, you can sit back in the relative warmth of the room. The golden light illuminates the leather and the needle clearly. It is a soothing light, easy on the eyes. It softens the edges of your world. The grime on the floor looks less dirty. The soot on the walls looks less stark. The amber filter is a forgiving cosmetic for a rough life. There is a mainstream historical fact that supports your feeling of luxury for centuries. Cloth windows were not just a stopgap for the poor, but a standard feature in the homes of the yeomanry and even the minor gentry, while the very poorest made do with open holes and wooden shutters, and the ultra-rich began to dabble with imported glass. The vast middle ground of medieval society lived in this yellow, diffused world. It was a sign that you had the means to buy linen and oil, and the time to maintain them. You are part of the amber class. However, the color does have its drawbacks. You pick up a piece of blue wool you intended to darn. In this light, it looks muddy green. The yellow filter distorts the color spectrum. You have to take the wool over to the door and crack it open a sliver to see the true color in the unfiltered daylight. It is a minor inconvenience, but it shapes your perception. Your indoor world is sepia-toned, the outdoor world is technicolor. It creates a psychological separation. Inside is safe, warm, and golden. Outside is wild, cold, and blue. Historians still argue whether this pervasive yellow indoor lighting influenced the color palettes chosen for medieval tapestries and clothing. Some suggest that the vibrant reds and golds often favored in period textiles were chosen specifically because they looked rich and warm under the yellow cast of oil and candlelight, while cooler blues and purples would have looked dull and lifeless indoors. You are living in a visual environment that actively suppresses the cool end of the spectrum. As the morning progresses, you notice the shadow puppet show that your window provides. You cannot see out. The view is gone. But the window is not a blank wall. It is a screen. You see a dark, blurred shape drift across the glowing rectangle. It moves slowly, bobbing slightly. It is a neighbor walking past. You can't tell who it is. It is just a blob of shadow, but you know someone is there. Then a smaller, faster shadow flits across the top corner. A bird. This silhouette theater becomes a form of entertainment. You learn to read the blobs. A large, lumbering shadow that blocks half the light. That's a cart loaded with hay. A sharp, jagged shadow that thrashes back and forth. The tree branch is getting too close and needs trimming. You are connected to the movement of the village, but you are protected from its scrutiny. The neighbor walking past sees only the dull, flat surface of the oiled cloth. They cannot see you sitting at your table. For a society where privacy is almost non-existent, where families sleep in one room and neighbors know your business before you do, this screen offers a rare and precious shield. You are hidden in plain sight. The room also sounds different. The old wooden shutter reflected sound, making the cottage echo with every scrape of a chair or clatter of a pot. The linen window is an absorber. It acts like an acoustic panel. It swallows the high frequencies. The room feels quieter, deader, in an acoustic sense. When you speak to your family, your voices sound closer, more intimate. The howling of the wind outside is muffled to a dull, distant roar, like the sound of the ocean heard from behind a dune. This acoustic dampening adds to the sleepy, cozy atmosphere. It feels like the house is wrapped in a blanket. There is a quirky, fringe tidbit about these windows that you might have heard from a traveling merchant. In some of the slightly wealthier households, or perhaps in the guest rooms of an inn, trying to appear fancy, people would paint a grid of black lines onto the oiled linen. They were trying to mimic the look of leaded glass windows, creating a fox lattice effect. From the street, at a distance, it might fool a passerby into thinking the owner was rich enough to afford hundreds of tiny diamond-shaped panes of glass. It was the medieval equivalent of painting a fake sunroof on a car. You, however, are content with your plain, unadorned rectangle. You don't need to pretend. The warmth is enough. Around midday, the sun actually breaks through the clouds. This is a dramatic event for the oiled window. When the direct beam of the sun hits the fabric, the window blazes. It becomes almost too bright to look at directly, turning into a sheet of brilliant, burning gold. The oil in the fabric scatters the light so effectively that the entire room lights up, as if you had lit 100 beeswax candles at once. Dust motes dancing in the air suddenly become visible, swirling in golden galaxies around the room. The heat also increases. The dark, oiled fabric absorbs the solar energy and radiates it inward. You can stand near the window and feel the radiant heat on your face, like standing near a cooling oven. It is passive solar heating, centuries before the term existed. The smell of the linseed oil, which usually fades to a background note, wakes up with the warmth. The room fills with that nutty, earthy scent, rich and heavy. It is a smell that makes you feel drowsy, a smell of slow afternoons and safety. But with the light comes the realization of dirt. The oil is sticky. Even when cured, it has a tackiness to it, and it attracts everything. You look closely at the surface of your window. It is a landscape of trapped debris. There is a layer of gray dust from the road. There are bits of pollen. There are soot particles from your own chimney that have drifted out and stuck to the exterior. The beautiful golden light is being dimmed by a layer of grime. Cleaning an oiled cloth window is a delicate operation. You cannot scrub it like glass. If you push too hard, you might stretch the fabric, causing it to sag and flap. If you use water, you risk damaging the oil coating or causing the linen to rot from the damp. You take a soft, dry rag, perhaps an old piece of wool, and gently wipe the inside surface. Dust comes away in gray rolls. The outside is harder. You have to go out into the cold and carefully wipe down the skin of your house. Some of the village elders swear by using a piece of stale bread to clean the surface, rubbing the soft crumb against the cloth to lift the dirt without stripping the oil. Others suggest a splash of vinegar on a rag to cut through the grease. You treat the window with the same care you would give a wounded animal. It is fragile. One wrong move with a broom handle, one stumble while carrying firewood, and you could punch a hole right through your wall. A torn window is a disaster. It ruins the tension, lets the draft in, and is almost impossible to patch invisibly. You would have to strip the frame and start the whole stretching and oiling process again. So, you give the window a wide berth. You teach your children not to lean against it. It is a no-touch zone in the house. As the afternoon wears on, the light in the room begins to change again. The golden brilliance of noon fades. The window deepens in color, shifting from bright honey to a dark, burnished bronze. The light level drops, but the warmth of the color remains. It is a gentle fade out. There is no sudden loss of light. as the sun dips below a wall. Just a slow dimming of the lantern. You find yourself shaping your day around this light. You do your fine work. The sewing, the carving, the sorting of seeds. Closest to the window, you move the table to chase the glow. The window is the hearth of the day, just as the fireplace is the hearth of the night. You orbit it. There is a strange sense of timelessness in the amber room. Without a clear view of the sky, you lose the subtle cues of passing time. You can't see the length of the shadows outside. You can't see the position of the sun. You only know the intensity of the glow. Hours can slip away while you work, the steady, unchanging light lulling you into a trance. It is a productive trance, but a disconnected one. You are floating in a golden bubble, separate from the rotation of the earth. You decide to bake bread today. As you knead the dough on the table, the flour dust rises into the air. In the amber light, the flour looks like gold dust. It settles on the floor, on your tunic, on the window ledge. The room feels cozy, domestic, and secure. The contrast with your memory of the dark, cold, shuttered room is sharp. You remember the feeling of the wind on your neck, the strain of trying to see in the gloom. You never want to go back to that. You would rather live in this yellow twilight forever than return to the black box. But the oil has a lifespan. You notice in the corner of the frame that the fabric is looking a little dry, a little white. The oil is oxidizing, turning brittle. Tiny cracks are forming in the coating, invisible from a distance, but clear to your scrutinizing eye. These cracks scatter the light differently, making the window look cloudy rather than translucent. It is a reminder that your comfort is temporary. The elements are always gnawing at your defenses. The sun cooks the oil. The rain washes it away. The wind flexes the fabric until the coating fractures. You run your finger over the dry spot. You will need to re-oil it soon, maybe in the spring. For now, you just rub a little tallow from a candle into the crack, a quick fix to seal the breach. It leaves a greasy smear, but it holds the line. As evening approaches, the lantern effect reverses. Outside, the world is turning blue and purple with twilight. Inside, you light your rushlight or your tallow candle. The weak, flickering flame is magnified by the room. The yellow light of the candle reflects off the yellowed linen, reinforcing the warm tone. You step outside for a moment to fetch water. You look back at your house. It is a striking sight. In a row of dark silhouettes, your window is a glowing square of orange fire. It looks welcoming. It looks like there is a furnace inside. It signals to the darkness that life is happening here. You stand in the cold mud, shivering slightly, and look at that warm square. It is a beacon. It is a symbol of civilization. You are not just surviving the winter. You have carved out a space of light within it. You can imagine a traveler walking along the ridge, seeing that tiny square of light miles away in the valley, and knowing that someone is awake, someone is warm. You go back inside, closing the heavy wooden door behind you. The silence descends again. The amber light of the day is gone, replaced by the dancing shadows of the fire, but the window still has a presence. It is a black, glossy surface now, reflecting the room back at you. If you look closely, you can see your own distorted reflection in the oiled cloth, a ghostly face looking back from the dark. You realize that the window has changed the way you live in the room. You no longer huddle exclusively around the fire. You use the whole space. You have reclaimed the perimeter of your home. You place your sleeping pallet closer to the wall, no longer afraid of the draft. You have expanded your territory. There is a sense of peace in the room that wasn't there before. The anxiety of the open shutter, the constant readiness to rush and slam it shut if a sudden squall hits, is gone. You can relax. You can lower your guard. The linen is holding the watch for you. It is standing between you and the storm, unwavering. You settle down for the evening meal. The food looks warm and inviting in the firelight, the steam rising in lazy curls. You glance at the window one more time. It is opaque, dark, silent. It has done its work for the day. It has gathered the sun and brought it indoors. It has filtered the harshness of the world and given you only the warmth. You think about the glass windows you have heard of in the great cathedrals, the stained glass that tells stories of saints and dragons in jeweled tones of ruby and sapphire. Those are windows for looking at, windows for awe. Your window is different. It is a window for living. It is humble, made of shirt, cloth and seed, oil, but it changes everything. It doesn't tell a story of saints, it tells a story of comfort. It tells the story of a dry floor and a warm back. You wrap your hands around your wooden cup, feeling the heat of the broth seep into your palms. You are content. The wind can howl all it wants. The rain can beat against the walls. You are sealed in your amber capsule, suspended in a soft, golden dream of safety. The world outside is hard and cold, but in here, everything is soft. Everything is warm. Everything glows. And as your eyes grow heavy, staring into the dying fire, you know that tomorrow morning, the miracle will happen again. The sun will rise, the gray light will hit the oil, and your room will fill once more with that strange, beautiful underwater gold. You are living in a jar of honey, and it is the sweetest place to be. You are sitting at your table, enjoying the golden tranquility of your amber-lit room when you feel it. It is not the broad, rushing draft of the open shutter that you used to know so well. It is something sharper, more insidious. It is a needle, thin jet of freezing air striking the back of your neck. It feels precise, like an invisible finger pressing against your skin. You shift in your seat, pulling your collar up, but the cold persists. It is a breach. You stand up and approach the window. From a distance, the surface looks uniform, a wall of glowing honey. But as you get closer, the floor reveals itself. There, in the lower quadrant of the frame, is a hole. It is small, perhaps the size of a thumbnail, but against the mute, yellow backdrop of the oiled linen, it blazes with the intensity of a star. Through this jagged tear, the raw, unfiltered light of the outside world is screaming in. It is a blindingly white, blue, tinted beam that cuts through the gentle haze of the room. It ruins the illusion of the warm sanctuary. You lean in to inspect the damage. The edges of the tear are ragged. The oiled cloth, which has hardened over the months into a stiff, resinous skin, has not torn cleanly like fresh fabric. It has shattered slightly, the brittle oil cracking around the impact site. You put your eye to the hole, squinting. Through this tiny aperture, you can see a fragment of the real world, a patch of gray sky, a shivering branch, a muddy puddle. It is a shock to see the world so clearly after living in the soft focus of the fenestral. It is like looking through a keyhole into a harsher dimension. You know immediately who is responsible. It was not the wind. The wind pushes and pulls, stretching the fabric until it sags, but it rarely punches clean holes. No, this is the work of a bird. It is one of the unforeseen consequences of your biological engineering. Your window is made of linen and vegetable fat. To you, it is a piece of architecture. To the local wildlife, it is a giant, sticky snack platter. During the autumn, while the oil was still tacky, small insects, gnats, flies, midges, were blown against the window and trapped in the glaze. They are fossilized there, tiny black specks in the amber. You ignore them, they are just texture. But the birds do not ignore them. You can imagine the scene that happened while you were out fetching wood. A small blue tit or a sparrow landed on the sill. It saw the dark speck of a fly trapped in the mesh. It pecked. The beak is sharp and the hunger is real. The bird pecked at the fly, driving its beak through the stiffened, weather-worn fabric. It didn't get the fly. The fly is entombed in hardened oil, but it did manage to destroy your waterproofing. Or perhaps it was not a bird. Perhaps it was a mouse or a rat. The linseed oil is a fat. It smells of food. In the depths of winter, when the ground is frozen and food is scarce, the scent of a giant sheet of fat, soaked cloth is irresistible to a rodent. You have heard stories of neighbors waking up to find their entire window eaten. Nothing left but the wooden frame, and a few tattered shreds of sticky thread hanging from the nails. At least this is just a small hole. But a small hole is a big problem. It is the beginning of the end for the window's integrity. If you leave it, the wind will catch the jagged edge. It will worry at it, vibrating the loose threads until the tear lengthens. The rain will get in, soaking the untreated linen core of the fabric, causing it to rot from the inside out. You have to operate. You sigh and gather your repair kit. This is the part of the foiled window lifestyle that nobody mentions when you are admiring the golden glow in the carpenter's shop. The maintenance. You are not just a homeowner, you are the curator of a fragile object. You fetch a small pot of leftover oil, which has grown thick and sludgy in the cold. You find a scrap of fresh linen, a leftover cutting from when the window was made. You find a needle and a spool of waxed thread. You take the frame down from the wall. The room instantly plunges into the old, familiar gloom. Lit only by the gray square of the open hole, the wind rushes in triumphant, reclaiming the space. You shiver. It is a stark reminder of just how much work that thin sheet of fabric was doing. You carry the frame to the table, clearing away the bowls and spoons to make a flat workspace. The repair is a delicate surgery. First, you have to clean the wound. You take a small knife and carefully trim away the jagged, brittle edges of the oil around the hole. You are cutting away the scab to get back to the cleaner fiber. The dried oil flakes off in golden crumbs. Now, you have a choice of technique. For a small hole, you can try to darn it. You thread your needle. You push it through the stiff, oiled cloth. It is difficult. The fabric fights you. It is no longer soft and yielding. It is like sewing through thin leather or parchment. You have to push the needle against the table to force it through, risking a prick to your finger. Pop. The needle goes through. You weave a web of thread across the hole, pulling the edges together. But darning often puckers the fabric, creating a stress point. For a hole this size, a patch is better. You cut a small square from your fresh linen scrap, just larger than the hole. You place it over the tear. It looks like a bandage. Now you need to bond it. You could sew the patch on, but that creates more holes with the needle. Instead, you might use a period adhesive. You might have a small pot of cheese glue or casein. This is a common, waterproof glue made from curds of soured milk and lime. It is incredibly strong, used by joiners for centuries. You dab a little of the white, sticky paste onto the edges of your patch and press it down over the hole. You hold it there with your thumb, counting the seconds, feeling the heat of your hand transfer to the patch. Once the patch is adhered, or sewn if you chose the needle, you must seal it. This is the crucial step. You take your brush and dip it into the sludgy linseed oil. You paint the patch. You paint over the edges, blending the new oil onto the old. The fresh linen drinks the oil, turning that familiar translucent brown. But here is the aesthetic tragedy. The new oil never quite matches the old. The old window has aged, yellowed by the sun and darkened by soot. The new patch is bright and clean. It stands out. You have fixed the leak, but you have left a scar. Your window now has a visible blemish, a square that will glow a slightly different color than the rest of the pane. You lift the frame up to the firelight to inspect your work. The hole is gone. The draft is blocked, but the shadow of the patch is clear. It looks like a small island floating in the golden sea. You accept this. A patched window is a badge of honor. It shows that you are thrifty, that you are attentive, that you do not simply throw things away when they break. There is a mainstream historical fact that underscores the value of what you are holding. In the medieval period, glass and even high-quality oiled fenestrals were considered movable property. They were not legally part of the house. If you were a tenant and you moved to a new village, you popped your windows out of the frames and took them with you, leaving the landlord with a house full of empty holes. You would strap your windows to the back of your cart, along with your pots and your bedding. This frame in your hands is an asset, something you can sell, trade, or bequeath to your children. It is too valuable to let the rats eat it. You let the patch dry by the fire, turning it occasionally so it doesn't get too hot. The smell of the warming oil fills the room again, a comforting reprise of the installation day. While you wait, you inspect the rest of the surface. You run your hand lightly over the skin of the window. You feel other weaknesses. Here, near the corner, the fabric is worn thin from rubbing against the stone sill. There, a long scratch where a branch lashed against it in the last gale. The window is a map of the weather you have survived. It records the storms. It records the accidents. It is a living document of the winter. You decide to reinforce the worn corner while you have the oil out. You dab a little extra grease onto the thinning fabric, rubbing it in with your thumb. It is a constant battle against entropy. The sun cooks the oil, making it brittle. The rain washes it away. The wind flexes it. The fabric wants to return to being dirt. You are forcing it to remain a window. Historians still debate the seasonal habits regarding these windows. Some argue that in the summer, when the days were long and warm, people would take the oiled frames down entirely and store them in chests to preserve them from the intense summer sun, which would degrade the oil much faster than the weak winter light. Others believe they were left up year-round to keep out the summer flies and the smell of the street. You find yourself in the camp of preservation. When the spring truly comes, you will likely take this frame down. Wrap it in an old woolen blanket and hide it in the coolest part of your house. It is too precious to waste on a warm day. The patch feels tacky but stable. You decide it is dry enough to reinstall. You carry the frame back to the opening. The wind is still whistling through the stone gap, eager to get in. You push the frame into place. Thump, you wedge it tight. The draft stops instantly. You step back. The room returns to its golden equilibrium. The blinding white star of the tier is gone. In its place is a darker, denser square where the patch sits. It casts a shadow on the floor, a faint, square silhouette. It is an imperfection. Yes, but it is a warm imperfection. You sit back down at your table. You feel the back of your neck. No draft. The repair held. You feel a small surge of pride. You have defended your fortress. But the incident has made you hyper, aware of the fragility of your comfort. You find yourself glancing at the window every time a bird flies past outside. You flinch when you see a shadow swoop too close. You have become a guardian of the cloth. You might even go outside later and trim back that rose bush that is getting too close to the wall. You might construct a crude scarecrow or hang a shiny piece of metal on a string near the window to frighten the birds away. You are actively managing your perimeter. Later in the day, a heavy rain begins to fall. You watch the window with renewed anxiety. You look at the patch. Will the glue hold against the moisture? Will the new oil repel the water? You see a dark spot appearing on the patch. Dampness. The new oil hasn't fully cured yet. It is struggling. You feel a knot of worry in your stomach. If the patch fails, the water will drip onto your sill, then onto your floor. You take a piece of tallow candle and rub it over the damp patch on the inside, adding a layer of solid grease to help the barrier. It smears the view, making the patch look even messier, but it seems to stop the darkening. You have shored up the defenses. This constant tinkering is the price of the light. If you had a wooden shutter, you would just close it and forget it. Wood is tough. Wood doesn't care about a sparrow's beak. But wood is dark. You have traded durability for luminosity. It is a trade you are willing to make. But the debt is paid in vigilance. As you work on your chores, you notice the other subtle ways the window is aging. The linen is sagging slightly in the middle. When it was first stretched, it was tight as a drum. Now, after months of humidity and gravity, it has a belly. It bows inward slightly under the pressure of the wind outside. This changes the acoustic properties. The window no longer hums, it flutters. A low, soft flap, flap, flap sound when the gust is strong. It is the sound of a sail that has lost its tension. You know that next year, you will have to strip the cloth off the frame, wash it if it survives, and re-stretch it. Or perhaps you will have to buy new linen. The cycle of the window is agricultural. You harvest the flax, weave the cloth, press the oil, make the window, use the window, compost the window. It is a biodegradable technology. It returns to the earth. There is a strange beauty in this decay. The window is organic. It feels more akin to your own skin than to the stone walls of your house. It ages, it wrinkles, it scars. It needs to be oiled and cared for. It creates a relationship between you and the house that is intimate and physical. Night falls and the window goes black. You can't see the patch anymore. You can only hear the rain. You listen closely, tuning out the fire and the breathing of your family. You are listening for the drip. Silence. The patch is holding. The cheese glue, and the sludge oil are doing their job. You settle into your bedding. The room is warm. The draft is gone. You think about the bird that pecked the hole. It is probably huddled in a hedge somewhere, cold and wet, still hungry. You are in here, dry and golden. You have won this round. But you know there are other enemies. The mold is waiting for a damp spell to bloom on the corners of the frame. The heat of the fire is slowly drying out the wood, threatening to warp it. The rats are scratching in the thatch. Your amber shield is under constant siege. You make a mental note to check the other window in the back room tomorrow. It hasn't been oiled since autumn. It might need a top-up. You are the keeper of the membranes. It is a humble title, but tonight, as the storm lashes against the village, it feels like the most important job in the world. You drift off to sleep, your eyes resting on the dark square of the window. You can just barely make out the shape of the patch, a darker shadow within the shadow. It looks like a seal, a stamp of approval. It says, "This home is cared for." And in the morning, when the sun rises, that patch will be there, a little island of darker gold, reminding you that the light is precious, the warmth is earned, and that nothing, not even a simple hole in a piece of cloth, is too small to matter when you are living on the edge of the cold. You stand back and look at your patched linen window, the repair holding firm against the draft, but offending your sense of perfection. The scar of the fresh oil against the old, yellowed fabric bothers you more than it should. It is a reminder that linen, for all its utility, is a compromise. It is a woven thing, a grid of tiny holes held together by tension and hope. You begin to wonder if there are other materials, other substances in your world that might serve the purpose better. You have heard rumors from travelers, stories of the great houses in the city, where the windows are not made of shirt, cloth, but of something solid, something that doesn't flutter in the gale. Your curiosity leads you to the local tanner, or perhaps a scribe who deals in the skins of animals. You are investigating the concept of the parchment window. This is a step up in the hierarchy of window materials, a move from the vegetable kingdom of flax to the animal kingdom of sheep and goat. Parchment is not leather. It is not tanned to be soft and supple. It is skin that has been stretched, scraped, and dried under tension until it becomes a stiff, white membrane. It is the material of books, of royal charters, and, for those who can afford it, of superior windows. You manage to acquire a few scraps of parchment, perhaps the cuts that were too irregular for a manuscript page. They are stiff, crinkling with a sharp, dry sound as you handle them. They are pale, creamy white, with a texture that is smooth on one side and slightly fuzzy on the other, where the hair was scraped away. You decide to run a test. You have a small ventilation opening in your pantry, a narrow slit in the stone that usually stays shuttered. It is the perfect laboratory for your experiment. The process of making a parchment window is more akin to shoemaking than carpentry. You cannot just stretch a single skin across a large frame, because animals are not rectangular. They are shaped like animals. To fill a window, you have to stitch pieces together. You sit at your table with a heavy needle and sinew thread, piecing the scraps into a mosaic. It is tough work. The parchment resists the needle. You have to punch holes with an awl first, then feed the thread through. You are building a quilt of skin. When you have a sheet large enough, You dampen it slightly to make it pliable, then nail it to a small wooden frame. As it dries, it shrinks. The tension builds. You can hear the wood creaking as the skin pulls it tight. When it is fully dry, it is as hard as a board. You tap it with your knuckle. Thung. It rings like a drum. In fact, it is exactly the same technology as a drum. You have essentially built a musical instrument to plug a hole in your wall. You install this parchment frame in the pantry. The light that comes through is different from the linen. It is not the uniform, woven fuzziness of the cloth. Parchment has grain. It has internal structure. The light is creamy, mottled with clouds and veins. It is a heavier light, more blocked than filtered. You can see the overlap of the seams, where you stitched the pieces together. Dark lines traversing the glow like the veins in a leaf. The immediate advantage is obvious wind resistance. The parchment is impermeable. Air cannot push through it. It is a solid shield. When the wind hits the pantry window, there is no flutter, no draft. The skin holds the line with absolute rigidity. It feels secure. It feels permanent. But then the rain comes. You stand in the pantry and watch the reaction. When the parchment gets wet, it changes personality. It softens. It begins to smell. It is a faint, organic scent, the smell of a wet dog or a damp wool coat. It is the smell of the animal returning. As it absorbs moisture, it slackens. The drum skin loses its tension and begins to bulge and warp. The neatly flat surface turns into a landscape of hills and valleys. And when it dries again, it doesn't always pull back tight. It might dry distorted, pulling the frame out of square. Historians still argue about the prevalence of parchment windows in common homes. Some suggest that because parchment was so valuable for writing, literally the paper of the day, using it for a window would have been like papering your walls with money. Others argue that the window-grade parchment was the refuse of the industry, the flanky, thin, or scarred skins that no scribe would touch, making it a clever recycling of waste product. You look at your mottled, veiny window and suspect the latter. It is a window made of leftovers. Despite the smell and the warping, there is a sturdiness to it that you admire. A bird could peck at this all day and make no progress. A rat would have to gnaw seriously to get through. It is an armored window, but it is dark. The light that makes it through is dim and yellow, suitable for a pantry where you want to keep food cool and dark, but perhaps too gloomy for your main living space. You miss the brightness of the oiled linen, so you turn your attention to the other contender, paper. Paper is a newcomer to your world, relatively speaking. It is arriving from the mills in the south and the east, made not of animal skin, but of rags, old linen and cotton beaten into a pulp and dried on wire screens. It is thinner than parchment, smoother than cloth, and, crucially, it is uniform. You acquire a few sheets of heavy rag paper. It feels fragile in your hands compared to the sturdy linen and the tough parchment. It rattles when you shake it. It feels like it belongs in a library, not exposed to the elements. But you have heard that when treated correctly, it can mimic the clarity of glass better than any other material. You construct another small frame. You cannot stretch paper like linen. It will tear. Instead, you have to paste it. You make a paste of flour and water, the same glue used by bookbenders. You smear it on the wooden frame and gently lay the paper down, smoothing it out with the side of your hand. You have to be incredibly gentle. One slip, one poke, and you punch a hole right through it. Once the paste is dry and the paper is taut, you apply the magic ingredient again, linseed oil. This time, the reaction is even more dramatic than with the linen. The paper drinks the oil instantly. Because paper fibers are so short and packed so tight, the oil saturates it completely, turning it almost transparent. It doesn't just glow. It allows you to see vague shapes. You hold your hand up behind the oiled paper, and you can see the outline of your fingers clearly. It is the closest thing to seeing out you have ever experienced without opening a hole in the wall. You install the paper window in place of the parchment one. The difference is shocking. The pantry is suddenly flooded with light. It is a bright, clear, almost white light. The paper has none of the brown undertones of the raw linen or the yellow density of the parchment. It is crisp. It feels modern. But as you stand there admiring the clarity, a gust of wind slams against the house. The paper window doesn't drum or flutter, it crackles. It makes a sharp, dry snapping sound, like dry leaves being crushed. It vibrates frantically. You can see the surface shivering. It looks terrified. The fragility is the main drawback. You know instinctively that a heavy hailstone would go through this paper like a bullet. A stray branch would shred it. And water. If the oil coating isn't perfect, if there is a single pinhole where water can touch the paper pulp, the window will dissolve. It will turn back into mush. You are relying entirely on the oil to hold the structure together against the rain. There is a fringe tidbit of history that fascinates you in some regions. People used palimpsest, windows. They would buy old, discarded paper documents, outdated tax rolls, old letters, scraps of failed books, and oil them for windows. If you stood inside such a house, the sunlight would project the ghostly, backwards handwriting of the past onto your floor. You would be living inside a book. Your window is blank, but the idea of reading your window while you eat your breakfast appeals to your imagination. You spend a week living with these experiments. You alternate between the linen in the main room, the parchment in the pantry, and the paper in the shed. You become a connoisseur of translucency. You observe how the parchment glows with a bloody, organic warmth at sunset, looking like a living membrane. You watch how the paper shines like a lantern, bright but brittle. You notice how the linen sits comfortably in the middle, not as tough as skin, not as clear as paper, but reliable. The acoustic differences become clear too. The parchment is a bass drum, booming with the wind. The paper is a snare drum, rattling and snapping. The linen is a mute, absorbing the sound into its soft weave. You realize that the sound of your home depends entirely on what you stretch across the holes. A house with paper windows sounds nervous. A house with parchment windows sounds deep and resonant. A house with linen windows sounds muffled and cozy. One evening, you decide to test the waterproofing of your paper experiment. You take a cup of water and splash it against the outside of the shed window. The water hits the oiled surface and mostly runs off, but you see a dark spot form instantly in the corner. The paper buckles. The tension releases. The window goes soggy. You poke it gently, and your finger goes right through, leaving a ragged, wet hole. The experiment is a failure. Paper, it seems, is too high maintenance for your climate. It belongs in the dry heat of the south, or under the deep eaves of a wealthy house where the rain never reaches the walls. The parchment, meanwhile, has dried out from the last rain and become so tight it has actually pulled the nails out of the wood. It has warped the frame into a diamond shape. It is too strong for its own good. It fights the wood. You return to your main room and look at your linen window with new appreciation. It is the Goldilocks material. It is strong enough to resist the wind, but flexible enough not to warp the frame. It is absorbent enough to take the oil deeply, but structural enough not to dissolve when wet. It breathes, it moves. It is a textile, and you are a person who wears textiles. It makes sense that your house wears them too. You realize that the technology of the window is not just about the material. It is about the ecosystem of the house. You have flax in the field. You have oil in the jar. You have linen on your back. The linen window fits into the economy of your life. Parchment requires a dead animal and a skilled tanner. Paper requires a mill and a merchant. Linen just requires you and a loom. However, the experiment has taught you something about light. You miss the brightness of the paper. You wonder if there is a way to get that clarity without the fragility. You find yourself scraping the linen window harder when you clean it, trying to thin the fabric, trying to wear it down to a sheer veil to let more light in. You are chasing the sun. There is a scholarly debate about the transition period between these materials. Some historians argue that paper windows were actually quite common in urban areas before glass took over, appearing as a standard feature in city tenements, where replacing glass would be too costly due to frequent breakage. In the countryside, however, the linen tradition held strong because it was robust. You are a country dweller, and your experiment confirms the wisdom of your ancestors. The city might have its bright, rattling paper windows, but out here where the wind has teeth, you need the cloth. You take down the failed paper window and the warped parchment frame. You strip the materials off. The paper goes into the fire, flaring up in a burst of green and blue flame from the oil. The parchment you save. You can cut it up and use it for washers, or perhaps to repair a shoe sole. Nothing is wasted. You settle back into the amber glow of the linen. But you look at it differently now. You see it not as the only option, but as the best option among flawed choices. You appreciate the weave. You see the thousands of tiny threads interlocking, sharing the load of the wind. It is a collective effort, unlike the solitary sheet of paper. As you sit there, you imagine a material that would combine the best of all worlds. Imagine a material as clear as air, so you could see the birds without opening the shutter. Imagine a material as hard as stone, so the wind could not shake it. Imagine a material that never rotted, never smelled, and never needed oiling. It sounds like a fairy tale, a substance that is solid yet invisible. You have seen beads of glass, of course. You have seen the small, thick, greenish bottoms of drinking vessels. You know that glass exists. But the idea of a sheet of glass big enough to fill a window seems physically impossible. Glass is something you blow into a bubble, not something you flatten into a board. And even if you could, it would surely shatter the first time the shutter slammed against it. It is a fantasy material reserved for the shrines of saints, not for the homes of people who bake bread and mend shoes. Yet, the hunger for light that the paper experiment sparked in you remains. You find yourself leaving the shutter open a little longer in the mornings, enduring the cold just to see the true colors of the world. You have tasted the clarity, and the amber fog of the linen now feels a little heavier, a little more suffocating. You look at the patch on your window again. It is no longer just a repair, it is a symbol of the limitations of your technology. You are pushing the boundaries of what cloth and oil can do. You have reached the peak of the age of linen. You are waiting for the next age to dawn. You spend the rest of the afternoon oiling the main window, applying a fresh coat to seal the microscopic cracks. The smell of the linseed is comforting, a known quantity. You rub the oil in with circular motions, polishing the skin of your house. You are maintaining the status quo, keeping the darkness at bay with a rag and a bucket of grease. As the sun sets, you watch the light fade through the linen. It goes from gold to bronze to brown. In the pantry, the parchment window, which you installed because it was better than a hold, glows with that strange, fleshy, internal light. Like a bloodshot eye closing for the night, you are living inside a lantern made of organic parts. You listen to the sounds of the evening. The fire crackles. The timbers of the house settle. The linen window hums softly in the breeze. It is a symphony of natural materials. You feel connected to the earth, to the plants, to the animals. Your house is built of the same stuff you are. But deep down, a seed of dissatisfaction has been planted. You know that somewhere, in a workshop far away, someone is trying to figure out how to unroll a bubble of glass. Someone is trying to make a stone that you can see through. And you know that if they ever succeed, if that invisible stone ever comes to your village, you will be the first in line to buy it. You will trade your golden, cozy, smelly, high-maintenance amber light for the cold, hard truth of clear glass in a heartbeat. Until then, you drift to sleep under the watchful, cloudy eye of the oiled cloth. You dream of a world where walls are made of air, where you can watch the stars without freezing, where the barrier between you and the universe is nothing more than a shimmer. Seasons turn into years, and years stack up like the layers of soot in your chimney. You have grown older in the amber light of your home. You have oiled your linen window a dozen times, patched it twice, and tightened the wedges every autumn as the wood shrank in the dry air. You are a master of the cloth fenestral. You know its moods, its sounds, and its limitations. But the world outside your village is changing, and that change is slowly, inevitably creeping up the muddy road toward your door. It starts, as these things always do, at the manor house on the hill. You see a cart arrive, a different kind of cart, laden with crates packed in straw. A man gets out who does not look like a carpenter or a mason. He wears a leather apron stained, not with sawdust or white stone dust, but with gray streaks of lead and the scars of small burns. He is a glazier. He carries with him a material that is spoken of in your village, with a mix of reverence and skepticism, glass. You find an excuse to walk up the hill, perhaps to deliver firewood or pay a tithe, just to watch him work. He is set up in the courtyard, and what he is doing looks less like construction and more like jewelry making. He is not working with large, clear sheets like you might imagine in a dream. He is working with quarrels, small, diamond-shaped pieces of glass that sit in a pile on his table. They are not perfectly clear. They are greenish, thick, and full of tiny bubbles, like frozen pond water. Some have waves in them, others have a slight bow. You watch as he takes a long, H-shaped strip of lead, a came, and fits a piece of glass into one side of the groove. The lead is soft, pliable. He bends it around the diamond, cutting it with a sharp knife. He fits another piece of glass into the other side of the H. He is building a jigsaw puzzle, trapping the glass in a web of gray metal. When a section is complete, he takes a soldering iron, heated in a small brazier, until it glows dull red, and melts a drop of solder onto the joints where the lead strips meet. Hiss! A wisp of acrid smoke rises. The joint fuses solid. It is a slow, painstaking process. He is knitting with stone and metal. The resulting panel is a lattice of heavy lead lines holding small, precious jewels of green, gray transparency. It looks incredibly heavy. It looks fragile. It looks expensive. When he installs it in the manor window, replacing the old wooden shutters, the effect is striking. From the outside, the window looks dark and glittering, catching the sun in flashes. It looks like the house is wearing a necklace. For years, this technology remains out of reach. It is something for the Lord, not for you. You stick to your linen. But the idea has taken root. The definition of a good house is shifting. A house with cloth windows is respectable. A house with glass windows is modern. Slowly, the price begins to drop. New glassworks are opening in the forests, burning vast amounts of timber to melt sand and ash into liquid stone. The forest glass, as they call it, is becoming more common. You start to see it in the house of the wealthy wool merchant. Then, the innkeeper buys a small panel for the common room to attract better clientele. The day finally comes when you decide to make the leap. You have saved your coins. You have waited for the glazier to come back through the village. You are not buying a whole window. That would cost more than your livestock. You are buying a half window. You will keep the bottom half of your window, opening covered with a wooden shutter or a piece of oiled cloth for ventilation. But the top half, the part that catches the sky, will be glass. You stand in your main room, the familiar amber light of the linen bathing you in its warm, fuzzy glow for the last time. You feel a strange pang of nostalgia. This cloth has protected you for years. It has been your filter, your shield, your soft focus lens. But you are ready for clarity. You take the hammer and knock out the wedges holding the linen frame. You pull it loose. For a moment, the raw wind and the bright, blinding daylight rush in, reminding you of the old days. But then you lift the new panel into place. It is heavy. The lead lattice adds significant weight. You have to grunt to lift it high enough. You settle it into the stone groove. It doesn't wedge in like the wood. It needs to be pointed with mortar or puttied to seal the gaps. You work the gray paste around the edges, locking the frame into the masonry. Then you step back. The change is violent in its clarity. For the first time in your life, you are standing inside your house, with the walls sealed against the wind, and you can see the clouds. You can see the branches of the oak tree swaying. You can see the smoke rising from your neighbor's chimney. The view is chopped up by the diamond pattern of the lead, dissected into little geometric vignettes. But it is there. The light is no longer yellow. It is white. It is blue. It is the true light of the day. The interior of your house suddenly looks different. The soot on the ceiling is blacker. The crumbs on the floor are more visible. The warm, forgiving sepia tone of the oil is gone, replaced by an unforgiving, high-definition reality. You walk up to the glass. It is cold, much colder than the linen ever was. The linen held pockets of air in its weave. The glass is a solid conductor. It sucks the heat right out of the room. You can feel the chill radiating from it, falling down the wall like a waterfall of cold air. But you can look through it. You put your face close to a diamond pane. The glass is not perfect. It distorts the view. As you move your head, the tree outside seems to wobble and ripple as if it were underwater. The bubbles in the glass catch the light and sparkle. It is a mesmerizing, fluid view of the world. You are looking through a solidified liquid. There is a fascinating historical detail about the manufacturing of this glass that explains the distortion. Most of it is crown glass. The glass blower blows a bubble, transfers it to a metal rod, and then spins it furiously in the furnace. The centrifugal force flattens the bubble into a giant, spinning disk of glass. When it cools, they cut the diamond shapes from this disc. The glass is thinnest at the edge and thickest in the middle, where the rod was attached. This centerpiece, the bullseye, is a thick, swirling lump of glass. Ironically, in your time, the bullseye is the cheap cut. It is optically terrible. You can't see anything through it but a blur. It is sold to the poorer customers or used for the back windows of barns. You, being a person of some means now, have bought the clearer diamonds cut from the rim. Centuries later, people will pay extra for the authentic look of the bullseye, not realizing they are paying a premium for what was essentially the medieval glass blower's waste product. Living with glass is a different experience entirely. The acoustics of the room change again. The linen was a muffler, the glass is a reflector. Sounds inside the house become brighter, sharper. The fire crackles with a crisp snap. Your voice bounces off the hard surface. The house feels less like a nest and more like a hall. And then there is the privacy issue. You realize with a start that if you can see out, people can see in. The amber glow of the linen hides you. The glass exposes you. You see a neighbor walking past, and they look up and see you staring at them. You both freeze, caught in a moment of awkward, unprecedented eye contact through a wall. You realize you will need curtains. You have solved the light problem, but you have created a privacy problem. Historians often debate how the arrival of clear glass changed the psychology of the home. Some argue it created the concept of looking out as a leisure activity. Before glass, you looked out to check the weather or spot danger. Now, you can sit with a cup of ale and just watch the world go by. The window becomes a screen, a form of passive entertainment. You are no longer just an inhabitant of the house. You are an audience member to the street. The maintenance is different, too. You don't oil glass. You don't patch it with cheese glue. You wash it. You discover that glass gets dirty in a way linen didn't show. Smoke builds up a greasy film on the inside. Rain splashes mud on the outside. You have to polish it with vinegar and a rag to keep that expensive transparency. And it is fragile, far more fragile than the parchment or the oiled cloth. A stone thrown by a careless child doesn't just bounce off, it shatters the pane. Crack. A single diamond breaks. The repair is not something you can do yourself with a needle and thread. You have to wait for the glazier to return. You have to pay him to cut a new diamond, melt the lead, and solder it in. A broken window is no longer a chore. It is a financial crisis. This leads to a peculiar behavior regarding these windows. They are considered so valuable that they are treated like furniture. If you decide to move house, you do not leave the glass behind. You hire a mason to chip the mortar away. You pop the frame out, and you take it with you. The law recognizes this. The glass belongs to the tenant, not the landlord. You can imagine the strange sight of a family moving cart, piled high with bedding, pots, and a stack of leaded glass windows, rattling precariously as they head to the next village. As winter sets in, you notice another phenomenon: frost. The oiled linen would get stiff with cold, but the glass does something magical. The moisture in the warm room hits the freezing cold surface of the pane and crystallizes. You wake up one morning to find that your view is blocked not by wood or cloth, but by a fern forest of white ice growing on the glass. It is beautiful, intricate patterns of feathers and leaves etched in frozen water. You touch it, and it melts under your fingertip. The window has become a canvas for the winter itself. The light that comes through the frost is blindingly white, a diffuse glare that lights up the room even more than the clear glass. It is cold, beautiful, and utterly silent. You sit and watch the ice melt as the room warms up, the patterns sliding down the pane in rivulets of water that pool on the sill. You have to wipe it up constantly. The glass sweats. It cries. It reacts to the temperature difference in a way the breathable cloth never did. You find that you miss the amber light sometimes. The white light of winter can be harsh, depressing even. The yellow oil made every day feel like summer afternoon. The glass tells you the truth about the gray, miserable drizzle outside. There is no filter anymore. You are face to face with the reality of the climate. But then the sun comes out, a true bright winter sun. It hits the glass and streams in. It casts a pattern on your floor, a grid of dark lead lines and diamond-shaped pools of light. It looks like a net of gold cast upon the flagstones. The cat, if you have one, immediately finds the brightest diamond of light and curls up in it. You move your chair to sit in the beam. It is raw, unadulterated sunlight. It warms your skin directly, unlike the radiant, ambient heat of the black oiled cloth. It feels like a blessing. You begin to notice other houses in the village upgrading. The patchwork of the village changes. The white ghosts of dry linen and the orange lanterns of oiled cloth are slowly replaced by the glittering black eyes of glass. The village is becoming transparent. You can see the flicker of your neighbor's fire through their window. You can see the movement of their lives. The community is becoming visually connected in a way it never was before. The walls are thinning. There is a fringe theory that the introduction of glass windows helped spark the Renaissance. The argument goes that once people could sit indoors in a well-lit, draft-free environment, they could read and write for longer hours. They could do fine detail work, watchmaking, painting, embroidery, without waiting for a sunny day or squinting by a candle. The glass window extended the intellectual day. You feel this yourself. You can mend a fishing net in the evening, with just the last gray light of dusk coming through the clear pane, a task that would have been impossible with the linen fenestral. You have joined the modern age. You have a wind eye that actually works. It keeps the wind out and lets the eye see. It is a technological triumph that has taken thousands of years to reach your humble wall. One evening, a storm blows in, a truly vicious gale. You sit by the fire and listen. You hear the wind howling, tearing at the thatch. You wait for the familiar thump of the linen, or the rattle of the paper. But there is only silence from the window. The lead and glass are rigid. They do not vibrate. They do not breathe. They stand against the storm with a stony indifference. You look at the dark, reflecting surface of the glass. You see the room reflected perfectly in it. The fire, the table, your own face. Older now, lined by the years. You are looking at a mirror that becomes a window when the sun rises. You think back to the days of the open shutter, the freezing blasts of air, the darkness. You think of the first time you stretched a shirt across a frame, the smell of the hot linseed oil, the joy of that first amber glow. You think of the parchment drum and the paper rattle. It has been a long journey from the cave, like darkness to this clear, cold view. You realize that you will never go back. The glass is here to stay. It will get cheaper, clearer, and larger. Someday, people will have windows that are entire walls of glass. They will have houses that are nothing but windows. It is unimaginable to you now, but the path is set. You have taken the first step. You get up and walk to the window one last time. You press your hand against the cold pane. Outside, the world is dark and wild. Inside, it is still and warm. You are separated from the night by a layer of sand and ash, melted and frozen into a clear sheet. It is a miracle you can touch. You tap the glass with your fingernail. Tink, tink. A high, clear sound, the sound of civilization. You turn away and head for your bed. The fire is dying down to a soft red glow. The room is quiet. The journey of the window is complete. You have gone from the wood, to the fabric, to the skin, to the stone. You have invited the light in and asked it to stay. And now, as the fire settles into the white ash of the night, and the last pop of the embers fades into silence, you let your own journey come to a rest. The history of the window, with its smells of oil and sticky pine, its sounds of drumming parchment and rattling paper, begins to drift away from your mind. It folds itself up like a piece of old cloth, tucking itself into the corners of your memory. You are no longer standing in a medieval cottage. You are back in the comfort of your own space, your own time. But the feeling of that deep, protected warmth remains. You can feel the weight of your blankets, heavy and reassuring, just like the wool of the past. You can feel the stillness of the air around you, safe from the wind, safe from the cold. Your breathing slows down, matching the rhythm of a calm, quiet night. In and out, slow and steady. The world outside your window is just a distant hum, a soft blur that doesn't need your attention. You are sealed in your own sanctuary of sleep. There are no drafts here, no leaks to patch, no oil to heat. There is only the soft, velvet darkness behind your closed eyes. Let your muscles uncoil. Let your jaw relax. Let the tension drain out of your shoulders and sink into the mattress. You are drifting on a raft of comfort, floating gently down a river of silence. The light has faded to a perfect, restful black. The story is over. The work is done. There is nothing left to do but let go.